Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
It's based on a Lynda La Plante story, which I don't know how much of it is based on that, but the script is just great, and some of the scenes in it are just, there's kind of like more style in some of like the 1 or 2 minute scenes than some entire kind of films in this genre. The soundtrack's great, the cast is stacked, good dog acting, and yeah, I when you picked it I was like, oh yes, this is going to be good. I'm a big fan of this one. It's a good one. Hey everybody, today we are recording with Marshall.
Hi there.
Rafa.
Hello.
And as always, Kobe.
Howdy.
And we're talking today about widows.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or anywhere you can give us a rating. Follow us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod, and we're also on Instagram at Flixwatcher. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their tunes that you can hear right now, and to Rockwood Audio for their editing skills. And if you're looking for someone to edit a podcast as sweet as this, then do get in touch with Rockwood Audio. That's ROKK Wood.
Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Our guests today are Rafa and Marshall. Over to you please, Rafa, to tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Rafa Ross. I am Brazilian but based in Scotland, and I am a freelance film writer and programmer. You can often see my writing on Variety, Silent Sound, Little White Lies and more. And programming wise, I was the programmer at the Edinburgh Film Festival for the last few years, and I program and curate specialist seasons around the UK.
How do you get into programming films? Because I think that must be such a, weirdly powerful thing. Because I'm sure, I know I get many people all the time asking, recommending films for them to watch, but you're like actually programming, I don't know.
To be fair, in a way, you are also programming films by putting on a podcast with recommendations. But I think programming is a very complicated combination of luck and obsession. Being at the right time, watching an awful lot of films. And I am very lucky and very obsessed.
When we recommend films, I was saying the royal we, when you recommend a film and someone doesn't like it, do you feel that more or less as a programmer, or do you feel a bit more distance from it when you championed a film that you think, right, let's give this little engine a bit of runway so lots of people can see them, and then does it feel good when people love it, or conversely, how does it feel when people don't take to it in the way you hoped?
This is going to sound like a beauty pageant kind of answer, but I swear it's true. At the end of the day, I'm just thrilled that they showed up and they watched the film. I think This is literally the biggest compliment. Even if they don't like it, it tells me something about themselves and I learn a little bit. But just having people show up, to me, is like the greatest thing. To be in a room with people watching a film that you vouch for is quite an incredible experience.
Nice.
Way to go, Miss Aberdeen. And world peace.
Thank you. Howdy, Sarah. Yeah. I won the end of climate change. Yeah, and world peace. Yeah.
What about yourself, Marshall?
Hey everyone, my name is Marshall Shaffer. I'm a New York-based freelance journalist. I am all over the web, but you can find me most frequently doing interviews at Slant magazine, reviewing for the playlist in Slash Film, providing streaming coverage at Decider, and in what little spare time I have, also writing a newsletter on Substack called Marshall and the Movies.
Well, tell us about Substack, because do people pay and subscribe to your Substack, or is it a free one that you do?
It's both. I try to give a good amount of free content. I usually try to do 2 newsletters a week. One is a little bit more of kind of a top 10 streaming list, sort of listicle type content. The paying version that usually comes out over the weekends is usually a little bit more in-depth. Sometimes it's an interview with someone who I think is really interesting, usually a fellow film writer. Oftentimes it's a deeper dive into a film that I think is deserving of attention. Sometimes it's just random things that come to me off the top of my head. It really just depends. And I appreciate those like Rafa who are willing to pay a little bit extra to see what kind of wild card pops up in their inbox every weekend.
It's literally the price of a coffee a month and is incredibly worth it. Marsha once sent a newsletter about films that you can watch it on an elliptical machine. And I find that to be incredibly useful. And also Marsha is very, very witty and the newsletter is a pleasure. So it's the price of a coffee and you guys can do it and subscribe monthly.
Well, thank you.
I do see people in gyms with their iPads more and more, or their phones more and more, watching the thing while sat on a trainer or a bike. And I myself watch Better Call Saul at the moment whilst on my bike trainer. So I think it is a genuine thing, isn't it? Like,
oh, yes.
Time poor, trying to squeeze as many things into one go as possible. And it's like, hey, why not? Why not? Otherwise, it's making not dead time. It's augmenting the time you have, isn't it?
Yes. Economists call it temptation bundling. It's when you can make yourself do an activity that you maybe don't want to do.
Freakonomics podcast.
Yes. Which for me is going to the gym with something that I do enjoy, which is watching movies, and you get the best of both worlds.
So, yeah, I heard that. Was that Freakonomics podcast? I heard that same thing, and it put a name to something I was doing already at the time. And I go to the extreme where, like, I can't watch Better Call Saul anywhere apart from when I'm on the turbo trainer. I can't watch it when I'm in my lounge. It has to be, if I want to watch the next episode of Better Call Saul, it has to be when I'm on the bike trainer. So, like, things like that. Anyway, you chose the film we're talking about today. We're talking about Widows. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And then we'll go to the synopsis, which will take 60 seconds or less.
Sure. Well, I chose it primarily because in the other episode, which Rafa chose the film, she chose a film called 9 Days, which I hadn't seen. And I thought I should return the favor by choosing a film that she had not seen. And after which felt like an hour of going through Letterboxd and cross-referencing what's on UK Netflix with what she's logged on Letterboxd, I found maybe 2 movies, and only one of them I wanted to actually watch again. And I texted her, or I WhatsApped her. It's like,
it begs a question.
Yes. So I WhatsApped her and I go, wait, have you really not seen Widows? Is that just an accident? She's like, Marshall, forgive me. I only watched the first 20 minutes. It's like, oh, we're making you watch the full thing because it's incredible. And so here we are.
Awesome. Can you tell us the synopsis? And the timer starts now.
Sure. So Viola Davis stars as Veronica Rawlings. She is married to Liam Neeson's Harry, who is a bank robber. In the beginning of the film, he's shown pulling off a heist that does not go so well. He and his 4-man crew all die, or so we think. Veronica is pressured by a sort of mob boss figure who's trying to get into local politics in Chicago, where the film is set, played by Brian Tyree Henry. In order to get the money, she's really forced with no other option than to finish the job that her late husband left behind. She assembles the titular widows, the other ex-wives, or the people who are married to the other people who were in the heist. Of course, none of these people have any experience doing anything in the larceny or organized crime racket. They also run afoul Colin Farrell's Jack Mulligan, who's a politician trying to run for the same district as Brian Tyree Henry's Jamal. And chaos and a great time ensues. And that's about 60 seconds.
There's the timer.
There's so many characters. It's
There's a lot.
We'll talk about a few of the characters, but Rafa, it's interesting. It's your first time watching it. First of all, why did you stop after 20 minutes the first time? And second of all, are you glad you watched it all the way through this time?
Well, to be fair, it is a great shame that I had not watched this until the end. But when it came out, I was working at a cinema and I watched the first 20 minutes and something happened and someone pulled me out of that screening. And I don't know why I never came back to it. I think I watched it again I tried to watch it again on a plane and I fell asleep, which is really terrible because I actually quite enjoyed the film. It's just the circumstance. But I'm a big Steve McQueen fan, a massive Viola Davis fan, and most of all, the biggest fan of plot twists of all time. I love great plot twists. So I'm really glad that Marshall was a trooper and perused my letterbox and found something I had not watched because this was a delight. What a great time.
I don't often know the story behind why people choose a film, but this sounds like one of the most, not torturous routes. You've worked hard to choose a film here. And especially because, guys, if you're listening, we only talk about films that are on UK Netflix. So Marshall was looking, cross-referencing with what's available on his Netflix or just available for him to get, not necessarily on Netflix, before we could talk about it as well. So you're doing like...
Yes.
Joining the strings in a lot of different places. So, I mean, kudos to you.
Done the homework.
Yeah, exactly.
This was my version of pulling off a giant bank robbery inside Colin Farrell's ancestral Chicago home. The real heist was the friends we made along the way.
Helen, did you see? I know you like a bit of Steve McQueen, don't you?
I do. I really like Steve McQueen's film. I didn't see this at the cinema, but I saw it relatively soon when it kind of came out. Like, how do you follow 12 Years a Slave, I think, was kind of where he was probably at. And I just don't understand why it wasn't like really, really huge and people don't still talk about it, because I think it's great. The script is amazing. We've got Gillian Flynn coming in with the kind of... It's based on a Lynda La Plante story, which I don't know how much of it is based on that. But the script is just great. And some of the scenes in it are just... There's kind of like more style in some of like the 1 or 2 minute scenes than some entire kind of films in this genre. The soundtrack's great. The cast is stacked. Good dog acting. And yeah,
Olivia.
When you picked it, I was like, oh, yes, this is going to be good. I'm a big fan of this one. It's a good one.
I was keen to revisit it. I had quite the opposite to Rafa. I had probably the ideal viewing experience. I was at the world premiere at the Toronto Film Festival with a packed house and their giant auditorium, and the crowd went nuts. And I think I probably left that screening with a sense that it was going to play a little bit better than it did. And I think part of it might have been the way it was marketed. I think it is a very tricky film to get people to connect with in some regards, because it is both a little bit too brainy for your kind of average Sunday afternoon cable thriller, but it's a little bit too pulpy action for the kinds of people who really wanted to sit with the really like gallery art inspired rhythms of McQueen's previous films like Hunger, Shame, and 12 Years a Slave. And I mean, you think of someone who was really trying to make a conscious next step after winning an Oscar for something that is pretty tough territory, to go and make this really confident genre film that has a lot to say and is really just perfectly executed. I mean, I really can't think of someone who's had a better kind of follow-up to something that is so tough and so tricky, like 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah, I mean, I have this thing about directors. I call it 3 for 3. Like directors have got the 3 directors, the 3 first films all being absolute stellar films. I haven't seen Hunger yet because in my gut, I'm like, I don't want to watch it. But Shame, 12 Years a Slave are all super hard watches as well in their own way. So this is him almost like a palate cleanser, but also not, because there's still some tough stuff that happens here. But compared to what goes on in Hunger and 12 Years a Slave, you know, like, he's having a laugh here in this film. I really enjoyed this. I don't understand why, like you said, it hasn't got to the heights in the way I think it could do. This is the first time I saw Brian Tyree Henry from memory, for example, thinking he's great. Love the fact he plays Miles Morales' dad in Spider-Verse. Plays a fantastic role in Atlanta. Daniel Kaluuya, we've had him on this podcast a few times in Get Out and Sicario, and always championed the British actors making it big in American films. And he is terrifying.
He's so scary.
This guy's not big, but he is absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
Not only is he terrifying, but I think the best scene of the entire film involves his character. When Colin Farrell is introduced to him and the name of Daniel Kaluuya's character is Jatemme, and Colin Farrell says, "I love you too." I laughed. I had to pause the film on Netflix because I laughed so much. I started to choke. This is the kind of intelligent joke that I love so much. And just to say, you were talking about, you don't know why this film was popular. I am going to be the feminist in the room and be like, because this is an action film with women leads. I think it puts off a lot of people watching and looking for a good heist movie, that this film was marketed as being about the widows and the women and having this incredible female ensemble. Not to be that person, but being that person. I do think a lot of it has to do with that.
I mean, that's unfortunately an annoyingly fair point, but you'd like to think that, 2018 people are still thinking, well, if it's a good film, it's based on a book, it's based on a TV show that people know. that it would bring more to it. I don't know how well it did, actually. Maybe did better than we say, but I guess by our initial musings, we expected it to probably be...
It did okay box office-wise.
Did it behave box office-wise?
It did okay. It didn't do great business. I think it probably
made... Sure.
It made respectable business, but I think they were also pitching it as a little bit more of an awards play, and it really didn't get much traction there, which I think goes back to the point that I was making about how it's pitched a little bit too in the middle for both sensibilities, and people, I think, have a bit of trouble categorizing what exactly it is and who it's really for.
And I would definitely not have had this as an awards contender, maybe because of Steve McQueen's pedigree, even though this is only his fourth film. That was maybe why they've been pitching it as that kind of play. But this isn't, as much as I see any kind of film could be boosted for and placed for an award, but I don't think this is the kind of film that would win them. And if it was played down that kind of route, then I can see why that might have been detrimental to its overall box office as well. For me, this is hey, look at the big cast. This is maybe knocked down from Ocean's 11 in terms of cast and see what we're doing kind of thing, but you're not an awards contender, certainly.
Yes, I agree with you there. And I think maybe the fact that I saw it at the Toronto Film Festival, where it was kind of pitched as one of the big flashy movies, puts it automatically in that kind of category for me. But when you're thinking about this film on the substance, I was so struck watching it again for this podcast. It is so smart on so many issues. It is so politically attuned. It has so many really insightful things to say about gender and politics and class and so many things that it's not necessarily making a very declarative statement about them, but it's asking you to engage with how these forces that are outside the characters are impacting them. And I don't think it wraps up a lot of what it has to say in a neat, tidy box. It doesn't give you these 4 kick-ass girl boss heroines that are really easy to root for. They're thorny, they're complicated, they make mistakes, but they present altogether this vision for how the world can be different or how the world would look slightly changed with women and their feminine experiences leading these things, and how it would be different if it's not just them trying to ape what a man would do in the same scenario. I think the way that Viola Davis's Veronica leads the group and tries to find some sort of compassionate leadership as opposed to just ruling by brute force is really fascinating. And the way that she embodies leadership is so different than anything that you're anticipating from the kind of ringleader of a group in a film like an Ocean's 11 or a different kind of heist film.
She's a very jagged kind of leader, isn't she? She's forced to do this and she's not apologetic about, okay, the person they thought was going to be a driver is dead. She's sad about it, obviously, but also like, we need to do this thing, and it's just all get on with it. She doesn't let the other women, the other people in the crew slack off, even though there's key reasons why things didn't go right in the planning. She's not taking no for an answer. And that's a really interesting way to do it, especially if this is your first heist. If all 4 people are new to the crime world, as in getting their hands dirty for the first time in crime, you'd think there might be some kind of leeway or whatever. But she's just there, she was focused, had a clear idea what to do, and unrelenting to it as well. And I mean, Viola Davis is like one of our best actors, like, just ever. And this is probably where I stood up and was like, okay, Viola, great, well done. We need to see more of you, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing, too, that we haven't really mentioned yet is that she's dealing with grief. Not only the grief over the loss of her husband, or so she thinks, wink, wink. It's revealed very late in the film in a way that I don't think I remembered being quite so prominent, is that she and Harry, her late husband, had lost a son in a very tragic way, in a sadly very common American occurrence of an unarmed young black man being shot by the police. And again, it's something that I think a lesser film would really put in the foreground and make you think of her as just bereft widow, defined by her loss. And it is so much about resilience and holding on to some core of yourself in the face of those things and not letting it define you. that makes it so unique and so powerful.
That's a very good point. It's what I was going to mention, because I think Widows has something very powerful in the combination of a star in Viola Davis, who's an incredibly versatile actress who's so attuned to the fine craft of acting in the way that she communicates emotions in stillness and in quietness, and a filmmaker like Steve McQueen, who is so skilled in representing very thorny political issues in a way that doesn't really destabilize genre and form in film. He's truly one of the best in this aspect. And the idea of the bereaved mother, and especially the bereaved Black mother in America, is a trope that can be so commonly used in detrimental ways, in really reductive ways. And here it is such a great aid in this notion that, of course, she's an incredible gang leader. Of course, she's an incredible ringer. She has gone through literally the worst thing a human being can go through, the sort of bereavement. So, of course, losing her husband and losing her entire life and the structure that she was in is an awful form of grief and an awful form of sudden loss. But this is a woman that has seen the worst that she can see. So she's even though she's not necessarily the most charismatic of characters, it's very easy to have empathy towards her, because you just find in this pain and this resilience, this forced resilience, such a beautiful example of one of the worst parts of the human experience. And even though there is an amazing supporting cast, it is her, the backbone of this film, in that performance, that is giving away these little details, in the way that the film begins with a little whiskey bottle, and the way that she touches her husband, and the form of intimacy. There's no words, there's no dialogue in that intimacy at the beginning of the film. And of course, what can you say to each other after you've been through this? That immensity of the silence and the intimacy that is formed after that, I think, is really beautiful, that first scene.
To talk about the supporting cast, because it is immense. We talked about Viola Davis, Michelle Rodriguez, probably one of the finest roles I've seen her in terms of an acting position. Elizabeth Debicki, I don't think we see enough of her, although I haven't seen The Crown, so perhaps one thing. It's the first time I've seen Cynthia Erivo, and
it's her debut.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. Right. She was on stage beforehand, wasn't she, in Colour Purple, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her coming from this. Colin Farrell, I forget he's in this before he's on.
He's so good in this.
He's fantastic. Yeah, accent work, phenomenal.
Robert Duvall, Brian Tyree, and who else was I trying to... we had a smattering of Carrie Coon. There's someone else that wants to pick up on. Oh, Jon Bernthal.
Jon Bernthal.
But playing a bad guy.
Yeah,
Jacki Weaver has randomly a scene or two and is great. The Robert Duvall is interesting. I don't think I fully appreciated... I think it's such fascinating meta-casting, because you think of Robert Duvall, at least in me being an American man, I think of The Godfather. And I had not really linked those two films in my head, but I think they open up a fascinating conversation with each other. And if you will indulge me, the ultimate in pretension, I went and found a great line from my beloved Pauline Kael, who wrote this about The Godfather, starring Robert Duvall. And I think it applies so beautifully to Widows as well. She said, "In The Godfather, we see organized crime as an obscene, symbolic extension of free enterprise and government policy, an extension of the worst in America, its feudal ruthlessness. Organized crime is not a rejection of Americanism. It's what we fear Americanism to be. It's our nightmare of the American system." And I think that applies so beautifully to Widows as well.
Oof.
We've had, in this year as we record, Anatomy of a Fall, won the Palme d'Or, but also won the Palme Dog. Since then, I'll look for great acting from not just dogs in film, but good animals. And the dog in this film was part of uncovering the plot twist, which Rafa was talking about, I guess. I was just generally quite fun generally in this film.
Great name.
What was the name of the dog? I know.
Olivia. It is the same dog from Game Night that Jesse Plemons holds on to.
Oh, is it?
It is, yes.
Oh my God.
Olivia.
How can this be profitable for Olivia?
How can that be profitable for Frito-Lay and Olivia? Olivia's making bank in 2018. Fun fact, I interviewed Liam Neeson a few years after this film came out. And this is a story he brought up entirely of his own volition. But he was talking about vocal work. And he told the story about working with Olivia's mom or trainer on the set. And he said, "I'm supposed to go roar, roar to this dog." And he came in and the dialect coach ran in and says, "Liam, you're doing the dog sound wrong accent-wise. It should be woof, woof. Use the back of your throat." And he goes, like, are you kidding me? Like, we're that in the weeds on it? It's like, no, it actually mattered. Yes, I just thought that was wonderful. And he said he eventually relented and went woof woof.
I've heard stories about really high-profile actors not moving from their spots until they heard the right intonation to make that move or to make the, respond. So this is just Olivia doing the same, right? She's just waiting for the right impetus to do it properly. It's like, before that, she's like, who's this guy? He can't even, speak dog properly. What we're doing. Is there anything you guys want to say before we head to the scores?
No, I think I just want to say that for whoever's looking for a really entertaining watch, to just go towards Widows and to just involve people in it. Because I think the revelation and the plot twist and the little things that happen throughout, it's one of those films that is really well enjoyed with other people. So I think at this time of the year, I don't know when this is going to come out, but I suppose even at the beginning of the year when you have some time in your family, and in the UK when you're cozying up for film night, this is such a good choice. I'm just happy I saw it, and such a different kind of offering from Steve McQueen, who I am used to going into with quite a guarded stance, because his films have quite a destructive emotional impact on me. And I've just watched Occupied City, his latest documentary, and that put me in a very odd trance for quite some time.
Is that the one based around London?
In Amsterdam. So he lives in Holland nowadays, and it's this incredible investigation of the historical ripples of Amsterdam and the war. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into Occupied City, but after having seen that recently, to see a filmmaker who is capable of doing that and then something like Widows is so incredible. I don't think we have many other filmmakers who are operating on the same level as Steve McQueen, and who is still, even though he's an Oscar winner and he has had hit after hit, still somewhat overlooked in the UK at times, which is incredibly frustrating. So I'm really glad that you get something like Widows so widely available on Netflix for people to see, and to really see him just doing a bonkers, incredible classic heist with an unhinged Daniel Kaluuya that gave me chills. I didn't know he was capable of such evil.
No, same.
If only there were someone who could commission a book about Steve McQueen. This is a bone to a mutual friend of ours who has a book's worth of ideas on Steve McQueen and is trying to find somebody to pay her to write the book. And I would love nothing more than to read it. So this is my hope that I can manifest it through this.
Well, our podcast manifests nothing so far, but why this could be the first one.
I believe in us.
One thing I wanted to say before going to the scores is one of the podcasts I produce, we did feature Lynda La Plante, and I did ask her about her thoughts on Widows, and she wasn't that big a fan of the film adaptation. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put it down there now. So there are people who, obviously it's closest to her mind and chest than anyone else in the world, but still there's obviously people who didn't get on with it, which might have alluded to why it didn't score as highly in the box office as we would have wanted it to do. But now for the scores.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
Welcome to the Flixwatcher scores, all of the scores out of 5. You can have decimal places if you wish, and we will start with you, please, Marshall, with your recommendability.
I'll give this a 4.5. I think in terms of, as I've been saying, people who want something a little bit artier, people who want something a little bit more entertainment value, I think you can see what you want to in this. It's entirely possible to just enjoy this as a pure thriller. You can see a lot of the political side of it if you want. You can see the aesthetic rigor of it, which we haven't even mentioned, that incredible single shot from the car where you see gentrification in action. It is just incredible. And I think the craftsmanship of someone like a Steve McQueen in a standard genre film just elevates it so much, even if all you want is just the good time in watching four badass women pulling off a heist.
Rafa.
I will give this the full 5. I think this is a film that works in so many aspects. It's a film that is entertaining, that is so clever, that I imagine myself picking it apart and rewatch. Even my husband, whose favorite film is just Vin Diesel, the category, he will only watch things with explosions. When he saw there was an explosion, he was into it.
Right at the start. And also it's got Michelle Rodriguez in it as well.
He was like, oh my God, it's Vin Diesel's girlfriend, explosions. He was so into it. And then we got into gentrification, and this is how you teach them kids. You get them with the explosions. So it's such a good time. I imagine myself watching this with friends, but also with my in-laws, with my dad. This is a film that works in so many levels. And I imagine myself revisiting with other people as well.
The only person I wouldn't recommend it to then is probably Lynda La Plante herself, but like everyone else, like you should watch it. It's got a stacked cast. It's clever, but it's not too clever that it's pretentious. And I really love Alice's journey. You kind of like, she's kind of the blonde, stupid bombshell kind of. She's beautiful, but she's...
But not stupid though, I think.
Well, this is it, that she's kind of set up a little bit like that. And her like mini journey, everyone kind of goes on like this mini journey through the heist, and watching it this time round I really got into Alice, and I really liked her. But yeah, it's great. It's a fun one. You know what, I'm going to give it a 5 as well. Why not? Fun for all the family.
I can't give it the full 5, but it's going to be up there, 4.75. Yeah, I enjoyed it more the second viewing. I did watch it in the cinema when it first came out. I remember enjoying it, although I don't remember thinking about it too much afterwards, and I think this time I will do. I didn't see the twist coming, which is not unusual because I'm stupid with twists, but that's how I'd like to be honest. If I saw it when I'm ahead of a film or TV show, I hate it so much. So when the dog... In fact, the thing I perhaps would prefer is that Carrie Coon's character didn't open the door to reveal it was properly Liam Neeson after that. Maybe that would have been a nice thing to wait until he stepped out into the garage at the end.
Oh, but I just love the fact of this man who thinks he's the king of the world, who thinks he's so mighty, reduced to just hiding in a closet after being sniffed by a tiny lady dog.
Yep.
Now, I like the hiding in the closet. I think, and Viola Davis' character knowing it's him. I think it would have been interesting to see for the rest of the audience not to actually see his face and Carrie Coon to open the door. Because she knows it's him. The dog doesn't. A lot of people like me perhaps wouldn't realise exactly what's going on and have it explained afterwards. And I kind of like that thing. That's just me being selfish, potentially.
I think if that's like the one sop he has to make to the very obvious, like, here is this plot point delivered to you on a platter, I'm willing to take it, because there's so much, and not to get too ahead of ourselves with the repeat viewing, but there's so much that he hides. It's like a major scene is taking place like just outside of the frame, where the camera pans away and you don't see the person getting beat up, or like the way that he edits something is not the way that you would think to edit it. And I'm willing to give him that one indulgence.
That might have been studio interference, knowing Steve McQueen. But yeah, I think it's, guys, watch it. Repeat viewing score, Marshall.
It's a 5 for me. I think in terms of, I think anytime you're watching a genre film like this, even though you are kind of familiar with the beats of the story, you're still watching it primarily for plot first. I think the second viewing for me opened up so much in terms of the themes and the characters. To Helen's point about just what a vast ensemble it is and how you can kind of connect to different people's arcs in it, and they all feel so complete. I think this time I saw so much more in the Mulligan family, which is Colin Farrell and Robert Duvall, this kind of political powerhouse dynasty in Chicago. And it makes such an interesting contrast for what is it that men just inherit and what is it that women just kind of assume, and that these women have to take up all this burden. These men have everything handed to them on a platter, and that Viola Davis and Veronica is faced with, potential life ruin. And for Colin Farrell's Jack, it's just shame. It's being a stain on the family. And I think it's so fascinating that the film has all these layers that you can continue to pick into without losing a shred of entertainment value.
I enjoyed the way more, or realised more, how much Colin tried to stand up to his father in this, but then also quickly relented. Mm-hmm. It just kind of goes to show, even to the stage when Veronica was there to have a chat with Colin, intermixing the actor and character name in this, apologies. And his dad was just like, no, you will take this this is the teacher union, you have to take this meeting. Colin's a puppet at this point, being manipulated by his father, but trying to take a stand. And it's such a weirdly experienced relationship, which I feel is very, very true to life. I think a lot of this is very true to life, apart from maybe the heist in itself, but I think everything else is kind of grounded in very much the reality that we're seeing in a lot of political areas. Rafa, your repeat viewing score?
I also think it's a 5. I can see myself viewing this again and again. I think it is one of those films that will not lose its entertainment value once you know the twist. I think it's something that you can even do it slightly passively. You can have it on the background. It's a film that you might become familiar, that might become a comfort watch in some ways. And yeah, I think it's a very clever, very entertaining film, and I can see myself watching over and over again.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4. Like, the first watch is kind of, oh, this is fun, this is good. Yeah, what's going on? Like, oh, it's a twist. Yeah. Go girls. Woo! And then the second time is a bit more like, you kind of know where the bits are coming. So it's like, what else can you spot? And I made like a few notes this time around. Like when one of the characters is crying and Veronica says, crying isn't on the list. Like there's just these little lines that are like really, really good singers. And it's towards the end when Alice and Veronica are in the cafe, and there's just this incredible mirror shot, which is just, it's so beautiful. Like, Steve McQueen, I love you. Please, please make us more films, because it's so incredible. I definitely want to watch this again because it's got such an energy and there's just so many bits to enjoy, even though you kind of know what's coming and you know what the twist is. So I'm going to give it a 4.
I think another slight niggle would be that after that shot in the restaurant, Veronica does meet Alice, or she speaks to him, even though Alice is off screen. I was like, oh, I think maybe it could have ended in the restaurant where they acknowledge each other. There's no beef. There's a definite kind of shared kinship there. Was it a step too far to have them chatting?
I think it's great because Viola Davis's character spends the entire film saying, we are here together once, we're not going to see each other again. And she puts this tough facade. But once it's pulled out, you realize that she wants company, that she's lonely, that she's reaching out to other people. I think that final piece of dialogue when she's reaching out to very tall Elizabeth Debicki is you see her outside of that panic mode, and you get to experience that loneliness and that desire for companionship that you know is there but has been suppressed by urgency. So I think it's quite beautiful, actually. I'm going to disagree with you slightly.
Well, I think it might be a little bit ham-handed in the way that it's executed, but I think it is, to Hoffa's point, totally in line with this vision that the film has for what does true leadership look like that will upend these established systems of capitalism and political patronage. It's ultimately succeeding alongside each other and not at somebody else's expense. And I think that's a fairly radical notion. And it's asking us to think about what that looks like.
Fair play. I'm going 3.9 for that. Small screen score. Marshall.
I'll give it a 4. I think it plays very well at home, as if, I think this is a film that is in many ways made for being played with commercial breaks on a cable network, watching it with your dad whenever, sports aren't on. I do think it loses a little bit of something not watching it with a big crowd. Again, I am incredibly biased because I watched it with arguably the best crowd there ever will be to watch this film.
Yeah. World premiere,
I know.
blah, blah.
But I think even just watching it otherwise, I mean, the crowd went nuts whenever Robert Duvall took that bullet. Like, everyone hated him, and that was a moment of just pure catharsis. Granted, I think this is maybe early Trump administration where, like, yes, the guy who said the N-word got shot. Amazing. We did it.
Pepper.
I think, it's a 4. I do think you would benefit from a big screen experience, as Marsha was saying, because you're watching it with other people. I think all the good heist movies, films with plot twists, whenever you're seeing with others, is such a great experience. And also, every time you're mentioning Robert Duvall comes in my head not because of The Godfather, but because of Deep Impact, legitimately and unsarcastically one of my favorite films of all time. And that performance is just absolutely incredible. So whenever Robert Duvall shows up, I'm like, I am here for it. This is going to be wonderful. And this performative situation he's in, when he's just that incredibly mean type of racist, but whenever there's something for him on the table, you put that facade that is so terrifying of like, of course you need to see her. She's with the teachers union, and there's something on the table. It's terrifying. He's on screen for maybe 5 minutes in the entire film, and he's so good. I just loved seeing him in it. Really great. Robert Duvall.
So what's your small screen score, sorry, Rafa?
4.
4. Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 4 club as well. I think it works fine on your TV at home, but yeah, retrospectively, I would have liked to have seen this with a crowd.
I maybe going a bit lower than you guys, because I did see it in the cinema, not at the world premiere in Toronto, but I did see it in the cinema.
I'll never live that one down, will I?
I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it in cinema. I can't quite remember the experience, but of the key bits such as the plot reveal. But in the UK, we tend to be a bit more muted, unless it's Endgame or Infinity War. All 3 Spider-Men taking the screen at the same time, we tend to be a bit more reserved in the UK than on the other side of the pond. But I think that there was a palpable tension in the room of not knowing what's going on, and some of the shots, like I say, with the car shot going from the poorer areas through to his big mansion, and just seeing the change in that step, and the focus not being on the car or people inside it, but the outside. It's just like, hey, this is why it's Steve McQueen. This is why this is happening, and those things work well in cinema. 3.5 then. Engagement score, Marshall.
I'll go like 4.8 on engagement. I think there are definitely some portions of the film that get a little bit plotty, and I find myself leaning out a tiny bit in those, if only because they just don't match the deliriously high highs of the rest of the film. But, I mean, a 4.8 is nothing to shake your head at. I think in terms of a film that engages you mentally, sensorially, just a feast for the eyes and the ears, you are hard-pressed to find anything that's firing on this many cylinders with this level of production.
Rafa.
I think it would have been more engaging if I had watched it at the world premiere, the Toronto Film Festival. But
who could have ever done that? Gosh. We should smack that person.
But I'm feeling very generous today, and I had so much fun with this film. Maybe it's because I've been watching some heavy films that have might been a bit slow, but I thought it was super engaging. I was so into it, so I'm gonna give it a full 5. I don't know, I keep saying I love plot twists, but I do love plot twists, and I think, Kobe, a little bit like you, I'm so dumb when it comes to plot twists. I watch so many films all the time, and people would imagine that I would know exactly when they're coming, but I never do. I'm such an incredible audience for plot twists. I just can't believe things are happening when they're happening. And I just love it. I am a sucker for it. So I was very engaged.
Helen?
Yeah, I think this is just like the perfect kind of length, because there is a potential to they could have like added a bit more kind of explaining. And some of the things you just have to not really think about. If you think about it a little bit too much, the magic moves away. Like, how did they get that car so quickly? And like, would that gentle bump really have caused that kind of impact? Anyway, don't think about that. So the level of engagement needs to be that you're super engaged, you're enjoying its nifty, pacey 2 hours and 9 minutes, but you're not really deep thinking into because it'll fall apart. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 5 as well. Like, I wasn't bored at all. Like, I loved it.
I think, who is it? It's David Fincher who has a saying something to the extent of, if I'm thinking about how practically it all works and I haven't done my job, because your brain should be on other things. If you're wandering to the point of picking it apart and thinking about the mechanics, and that wasn't the intention, then I failed.
Yeah, I've had discussions many times where people like focus on one part of a film and say, no, it's really bad because X, Y, Z. And I'm like, well, basically you just didn't like the film, but that's the kind of thing you're zeroing in on, and you can't explain why it's not worked for you. But yeah, I completely get that. I'm going for an engagement score of 5 here. I think there's layers, but they're not like intricate layers, but there's so many things going on at the same time. Helen, you talked about Elizabeth Debicki's character Alice and how she initially thinks she's a dumb blonde kind of trophy wife, but also she's, I wouldn't say inexperienced, but, having to get the car when she doesn't drive. She goes out and does it, She goes out and does it. She goes and get these guns, uses her wiles to get the guns. She works out how to get someone to give the details of the safe. So she's not dumb. She's just pushed into a box and people are like, this is who you are. And she kind of comes out of the box like a jack-o'-lantern, and she's the one that gets shot at the end in the heist, and it's so just taking her character, there's a lot that goes on with this one person, and I think it's very, very intriguing how that's played out. That gives an overall score of 4.52813, which is very decent, which is very good. And I think when we go to Twitter, that might tally with what people have said. In fact, should we go to Twitter? Let's go to Twitter. I refuse to say the new name. Guys, do follow us on Twitter. If you're listening to this your first time, we are at FlixWatcherPod. And do follow us because we talk about stuff about film and Netflix in general. But before a recording, we do put a shout out asking for you guys to give your opinion on the film and get a potential shout out. Look out for a tweet saying something similar to this. We're reviewing Widows with Hafeez and media_Marshall. Have you seen it? Tells your thoughts and a score out of 5 stars for an on-air shout out on our podcast. Can you pick the first one to read out, please, Marshall, as this is your choice?
Lee Thomas said, Steve McQueen on all cylinders. It sounds like something I said. Some terrific shots, and the mostly British and Irish cast are on top form. An extra half star for Cynthia Erivo in Full Flight. Woman is rapid. 4.5. If you look at that.
Rafa, do you have the other one there?
Yes, so Leon H. Dempsey said, blistering crime cinema with an incredible cast and a powerhouse turn from Viola Davis, so epic that it practically causes the screen to judder. It's also the best Neeson has been in years, which I agree with. McQueen adds an interesting political edge to proceedings too. 4.5 stars. Yes, I do think it is the best that Neeson has been in quite some time.
Agreed.
Best that Neeson and Michelle Rodriguez have been, so yeah. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for picking Widows. I've not seen it since the cinema, and when you said it, I was like, yes, of course I want to watch that again. Can you sign off by telling everyone where we can find you online and say goodbye to the listeners?
Sure. You can find me online at Twitter, provided it's still there, at media_Marshall. But more durably, you can find me on Substack, both writing new content and compiling everything else I write at marshallandthemovies.substack.com.
And you can find me on Twitter and basically everywhere else at Hafeez, Rafiews. And yeah, if you find me, say hello. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I always love chatting to Marshall, and I love chatting to you guys as well.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.